Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Maidenberg. I'm here with a panel of guests, and we're going to be talking about racism. The purpose of this is really to move towards healing and change. And hopefully the conversation will be fruitful to allow everybody to have space. So we're going to start, and we're going to have each person introduce themselves and then start into dialogue. So Daryl, did you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. My name is Daryl Aiken-Afam. I am a leadership psychology specialist, but I also have an organization called Ambient Noise, where we do work in mindfulness-based racism reduction. And we've been doing this for the past 5 or 6 years, where it's a blend of mindfulness, Taoist mindfulness meditation, social psychology, and other items that help to bring people together to have potent and effective conversations beyond just the cerebral cognitive level, but on the human visceral level. That's it.
Penelope? You're on mute.
I'm Penelope Moore. I'm a recently retired faculty from the social work department at Iona College. And I've been in social work education for a number of years, over 2 decades.
Thank you. And Nina?
I'm Nina Thomas. I'm a psychologist, psychoanalyst on the faculty of the NYU postdoctoral program in psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, and my dog I can't silence. I teach a course on trauma. I've been very much steeped in trauma for a number of years. A focus of my trauma work is on political oppression, and I've just taught a course which involves the legacy of racial trauma. I've written fairly extensively about this. One of the things that concerns me most is being able, as a white, identified Eastern European descent person, to shut up in the presence of people of color, since I'm much more concerned about the ways in which being a person of privilege, both by class and race, I don't want my voice to silence the voices of those whose experience I feel very keenly identified with, but want to leave this space for other people to create what they need to be heard.
Thank you, Nina. And Kimberly?
Hi, my name is Kimberly Grocer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in Manhattan and South Florida. I'm also an adjunct professor at Columbia University, where I teach in the social work foundations curriculum. I teach power, race, oppression, and privilege, decolonizing social work. And I'm also a lecturer in social work and psychiatry at Weill Cornell Medicine.
Thank you. And Myrna?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you, Michelle, for inviting me to such an illustrious panel. I am blown away by everyone's credentials and background. And I'm going to first and foremost say that I'm a mother of 2 young Black boys. And that's what I come here with. As a mother who was born in the 70s, and literally when I came to this country, hence why I identify as Afro-Caribbean Latina, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins were all different hues. So I didn't know the color of my skin, and I didn't know the N-word. And when we moved into our neighborhood, we quickly became familiarized with the N-word and a lot of the other racial challenges that I've experienced since being in this country. And I'm on here today to share my experiences. I own my own company. I'm a fitness professional, and I do a lot of work with teenagers, specifically the My Brother's Keeper program here in Greenberg, and working with mindfulness programs and empowering young men and women to be proud of themselves as people of color. And as you said earlier, Sandy, humans. So that's who I am.
Thank you. And Sandy? Sandy, we can't hear you. You've been on mute.
So I'd say thank you to Michelle for having me on this panel. I joined at the very last minute, and she just invited me and I got on, and I appreciate the invitation. Glad to be on it with everyone. I'm an immigrant to this country, came here from India 25 years ago, was never thought of myself as being a person of color. I mean, that was not even a thing in my country. I came here and became a person of color. So that was strange. I work with Michelle, I work at the Girls Club of Mount Vernon with teens who are predominantly from the Caribbean or Black, some Puerto Rican, and mostly boys. And the recent incidents have distressed me beyond belief because those kids are like my own. And it's been very hard for me to deal with. So that's my background. I have two girls myself, two daughters, and we don't live in Mount Vernon. So that's another thing which is so different from the place that I work in.
And I could just say that Sandy is so incredibly dedicated to these kids.
Oh.
I mean, she blows me away. I have to say that every moment I see her with these kids is beyond.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Francesca?
Hi, my name is Francesca Maxime. I am currently on Nipmuc land here in Massachusetts, but I reside on Lenape-Canarsie territory in the Brooklyn area of New York City. She, her, hers, Buddhist identified, light, white-skinned, advantaged, Haitian, Dominican, Italian, American. I'm a certified mindfulness meditation teacher, somatic experiencing practitioner, Indigenous focusing oriented for complex trauma practitioner, focusing oriented practitioner, and relational life therapy couples coach. And currently I teach a lot of people around somatic regulation skills, a lot of sort of racial and social trauma groups and collective trauma. And a lot of my clients are people of color or queer identified and otherwise structurally marginalized in the subject of systemic and structural inequities. And I guess the final piece I'll say is that I host a podcast called Rerooted, REROOTED, on Ram Dass's Be Here Now network that works with, it centers around racial justice, social justice and trauma, neuroscience, psychology, and the creative arts, all as methods of recovery and healing.
Thank you so much. Such rich experience. And I look forward to this discussion being so rich because all of you come from, such deep experience. So maybe we could just start out, really talking about kind of where we're at. And, some of you did kind of touch on that, what it's bringing up for you. And I think, one of the things that I thought was so helpful, like, for example, with the Me Too movement, I'm going to say, is people were telling their stories. And to me, that was so powerful because I got to, again, in some way understand, what others were going through. And I think when we could humanize our experiences, it really connects us to other people. And it, really allows us to tap into our compassion. So again, I don't know, what this is bringing up for you personally or, what you've been thinking about. And even just some, why you think this, again, we know that there's kind of structural, systemic, institutional, individual racism. It's there. There's like no doubt about it. We can't like argue about that, but really talking about maybe how it gets perpetuated or how you see that, and why it's so hard for people to accept. Because I think, for example, I think I shared, with the aggression kind of turning and the looting and all of this, all of a sudden I see people kind of like one day I was hearing a lot of compassion and unity. And then the next I was just taken aback at how it shifted again. The compassion was just like out the window. And it really disturbed me because there's such ignorance, I'm going to say, and misunderstanding. So I know it brings up different things for each of us. So if we could just speak to that and talk about, what we're seeing and what needs to change.
What compassion were you referencing that you heard?
Trying, again, I'm coming from a white privileged woman, which, I definitely aware, and I am so aware of my own biases, and I don't deny them, and I'm shameful of them, when they come up. But one of the things that I work on every single day is, again, shifting that belief system and challenging that belief system and not acting in accordance to my thoughts and feelings, so I tap into that every moment of every day, and I'm very aware of that, but I work on that like every moment. Not everyone does, of course. So the compassion, from what I saw from people who don't ordinarily tap into that, was putting themselves in other people's shoes, trying to see it from somebody else's point of view.
Like specific, are you saying this is compassion of white people talking about what happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Even those white people that I wouldn't otherwise see compassion from,
Okay.
right? Because there was a videotape.
Right. So
nobody could argue with it.
It would be really helpful to get to the real nitty gritty, to just call a spade in all of our dialect, because then they have to kind of dance around and figure out what's talking about who, because I don't think there was a Black person on the planet who was thinking compassion. I don't care how deeply Buddhist or Taoist or Christian they were at that time. So
yes, I am speaking from the white, at least from what I heard from myself and people around me.
Right. So there was no shift for the Black people in general. There was anger right out the gate.
Yeah.
And you've probably heard the saying that revolt is the politics of last resort. It's like we've been 400 years of begging, pleading, looking to the institutions, trying to obey the law, do the right thing. And it's like, there is no, you can't, this is wrong, Black is wrong, these lips, these hair, all of this is just wrong in this context. So with the presentations in the media, when you have the power to control information and access, you can truncate a historical event and say, this is what's happening. This is what they're doing again. This is this is that. And it's that whole political, rhetorical machine of they're wrong and we're right. So, and you can probably hear from my manner and demeanor, I'm really pissed. I'm a Black man who's been profiled by the cops 6 times in my life. The last time, and you know this story, Michelle, handcuffed at Hoyt Skimmerhorn, surrounded by 6 cops. Like, every time I leave my door in my own neighborhood in Bed-Stuy, that is becoming increasingly white, I'm more and more nervous when I go out, only because I might run into an Amy Cooper or this, that, and the other. So it's like, it's a very real, visceral thing where it's just like, when George was killed and when Ahmaud was killed, this shit was 0 to 100. There was no space and no time for compassion. It was about survival.
I think what you said, Daryl, hits it on the head. Many of us, as people of color, when we walk out every day, we this is what we are, and like the other day, my sons have electric scooters and they had on their hoodies and they were out and their batteries ran out in Ardsley where these new homes are being built. And I cannot tell you the amount of heart palpitation I had when I was getting in my car and like speeding to get over there, because they don't know any better. And, again, I love what you said, Sandy. I raise my children as human. I don't raise them as Black boys. They know about their culture. They know what they need to be aware of, but I try to have them see everybody through the eyes of love. I personally feel you look at life through 2 lenses, through the eyes of fear or through the eyes of love. Fear begets what we're seeing on TV right now. Fear begets anger, insecurity, jealousy, hate. Love begets empathy, courage. So when we see what's going on, like you said, Daryl, you have this visceral reaction. When I saw what Amy Cooper did, and then let's talk about something else, because it goes to the programming that you're talking about that we seen for over 400 years, right? We have been told that Black is whack, white is right. So when you see an Amy Cooper utilize her privilege by saying something like, I'm going to call the cops. It's that underlying understanding that she knows that they'll come and be on her side, even though she was wrong, 110% wrong. So it's one of these things where, you know, I've been very vocal. My father ran with the Panthers. My uncle ran with the Black Panthers, you know, walked with Malcolm X, all these different people. So I've always been that person that speaks out, even got in trouble in school over it. So I'm this individual that now that I see what's going on, at the end of my classes, when I teach, I say, I'd like for us to, if you're right to zoom out, but if you like, can we have a moment of silence to acknowledge all that's been going on? And yesterday, we started talking and I said, well, let me just ask you a question. Why do you dislike Black people? And I asked him, like, if your daughter brought home a Black boy and he was wearing a hoodie and was like, yo, what's good, Miss Such and Such, how you doing? But he was educated and that's how he chose to speak. Would that be off-putting? Would you not want that person in your home? And it's like what Daryl said, we have to start asking these questions. We have to deprogram. We're not the Cosbys, we're not the Boys in the Hood. That's Hollywood fiction. And in middle America, in places where they don't see me and they don't see Daryl and they don't see Kim, they don't see Francesca, they don't see Sandy, they don't see Penelope, they make these assumptions. When I walk into a room, I'm going to speak a certain way. They make these assumptions. So how do we deprogram that? We have to have these hard conversations.
May I add something? I'm aware of the various ways in which I've committed microaggressions without any conscious intent, but I see the impact of my attempts at making connections with my Black colleagues and friends and doing it in a way that can be hurtful. And I feel immense shame about that. The shame, I think, is also, has its own way of making me shut up because I don't know how to repair it other than to say, you know, I wasn't aware of doing something that was hurtful. And that's why I say, I feel the need to shut up in these spaces because without thinking about it, I could do something that hurts the experience and space of the other person.
Can I offer you something, Nina, that
Please.
might be helpful?
Please.
So on my contact and conversation page on Facebook, which is a part of my ambient noise work, we have a plethora of different people who belong to this page, white and people of color, all sorts of people. And Michelle will tell you, I am always speaking to the white people in the room when shit goes down, and I call white people out. And I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. Okay, you're an ally, you're a friend. What are you doing about this? How are you showing up? And if you don't have the skills and you don't have the knowledge and you feel shame or feel guilt, there are resources for you to go and get some education and some learning so that you can deal with the shame and the guilt and the whiteness. Because it's not so much an important thing to integrate and assimilate. The first thing that white people need to know is whiteness and to understand your power and your place and how you are interacting. You don't have to understand us first. We might not ever sit at a dinner table together, but you can always have respect for someone as a human being. So as far as being human, I want to be human all goddamn day long. Whiteness won't let me be human because as soon as I step out, as soon as it doesn't even matter if I step out. What's the brother's name? Was killed at home eating ice cream on his couch, minding his own business. The other brother killed in the backyard on his cell phone in his grandmother's backyard. You are not human when you stand in any land where white supremacy is in full effect. So you don't have to shut up. You need to step up and get some education. There is the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond that has the Undoing Racism programs, and they have something called European Descent, which is just for white people to step up, get educated, and then learn how to move forward with this. Because if you're sitting back in the cut, being quiet, that's not helping us, and that's not helping you, and that's not helping to fix.
And Daryl, I wanted to, Nina, just, you know, I see in my practice several police officers, and I want you to know that I have heard first-handedly from them. Okay, and we're talking about, you know, there are white police officers. I'm going to say that. Okay, we're talking about males and females, and I have heard undoubtedly from them that there is a bro code in the force. There is an absolute bro code, and people, and it's, you know, and it exists. So talk about education, talk about awareness. Like, why isn't that integrated into, you know, whatever, becoming a police officer, or what I think anybody who works with other people.
No. Well, of course it wouldn't be, because it's part of this. It's part of the cis hetero patriarchy that is the white supremacy, that is part of colonial settler history, that is part of the founding of this country, that is the history that people, A, are generally not taught in school, B, then don't choose to take up the learning of later on, because C, although it is sort of guilty, shaming feeling to say, I didn't know, it's also a very convenient continuation of, well, I don't know. Because all the systems work as structurally designed. They work to favor the people for whom they were designed to benefit, which initially was in favor of the elites against the masses, and then the masses were divided because of labor to white and black, and racism serves in service to economic privilege for a lot of people, and then racism becomes its own cancer that continues to serve and divide. And around the shame issue, my theory is that shame for white people is moral injury. If you think of it, if you're a psychoanalyst, if you're a psychologist, it refers to an injury in an individual's moral conscience and values resulting from an act of perceived moral transgression, which produces profound emotional guilt and shame, and in some cases also a sense of betrayal, anger, and profound moral disorientation. Shame essentially serves to move against intimacy and heartbrokenness and grief and mourning, which no person, and generally people in any supremacist culture or Western culture, are not allowed to do. Indigenous cultures, African American culture, there are all kinds of ways to dance and get together and do things collectively. Nobody sits across one another and just talk. Latinx cultures have danza, have ceremonies. It's ceremony, it's ritual. There is no life, death, birth, death. You know, there is a whole new context of the way in which we hold one another and respect our elders, and that understanding and doing the work, like Daryl was saying, about the history. You can go to my website, maximeclarity.com, for resources, MAXIMECLARITY.com. There are a gazillion resources of classes like whiteawake.com, pattydye.com, racism, the one he was talking about, the People's Institute. There's a Center for the Study of White American Culture. We have to make a claim to be anti-racist. It's not about being compassionate depending on the way that the weather goes one day, or who is the next person that gets killed, or how we feel like we're introverted and sort of slumped down. It's noticing what's happening in our nervous system and then being able to complete a distress tolerance response. So if you're noticing that you're hypo-aroused all of a sudden, to notice what that is as a threat response to your perceived discomfort while other people are getting killed. So I get to check out because I'm uncomfortable, but you're getting killed and it's deadly, and I get to not have to engage. So ending white silence is critical. Right now at this moment, things like donating to organizations like Surge, showing up for racial justice is critical, and finding out what they're doing or joining a group there. And then in an ongoing basis, forget about studying Black, Indigenous, Asian people. Study whiteness as a culture. All of what's been given up, all of what's been sacrificed from your roots, all of what was taken from you. And then figure out where these neuroses come from, figure out where these all kinds of shame and I'm not good enough. You're never going to be good enough, because in white supremacy, there's only one person on top. And whoever that is, the white cis het male, nobody wins in that. But you're on that ladder and you're fighting to be on that ladder. And then you get used to shame and you think about it's your ego identity. And then you get stuck there and then you get checked out because you have no energy, because the whole thing of shame is it's all about me. It's not about you, the person for whom I am connected with. I was never separate from. I am in belonging with, whether I like it or not. So this absolute spiritual bypassing, you know, sort of place that people go to of we're all one and this is happening to all of us with COVID, that's not working, because that is somewhat true in the sense that yes, we're all interdependent and we all breathe the same air. But when structural inequities and implicit bias and years of conditioning and neuroplastic limbic conditioning within your own orientation from a neuroscience standpoint all create the racist in you, which, as someone has said, is the air that we're breathing right now, we essentially are seeing people who can't breathe, who are not allowed to breathe, like Eric Garner, like George Floyd. And that is the problem. So you have to say, I'm going to be anti-racist. This is the moment. Being anti-racist, and don't get mad at the people who say anti-racism, like they're, you know, sort of bastardizing the person who even dares to say it's okay to be anti-racist or it's necessary to be anti-racist. If you're not anti-racist and you're non-racist, well, you might as well just say you're racist.
You've said quite a lot. Sorry, someone else.
No, I was just going to say, like my kids say that again for the back row, Francesca. You did that. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
My question really, it's more a question of clarity. I'm not sure if Nina feels shame, and I mean, totally, I think perhaps part of it is being uncomfortable to be able to talk about, because I've seen this. It's very hard for a person who is white to literally go out there and speak about, when she or he speaks about the fact that they do understand their white privilege and that they do want to make a connection with whoever it may be, with that understanding, you know, it's almost like there is this echo chamber saying, and I'm not saying you guys are, but it's very hard to step in without feeling like you will be sermonized, without feeling like you will be in some which way there is an us versus you, regardless, even by people who are Black, people of color, whatever you want to call us, against white people. And even if it is someone who's stepping up and say, listen, I do acknowledge the fact that I have been and I have made mistakes and I want to change and I want to come to the table and have a dialogue. At that point, they get to feel like it's somehow they're not uncomfortable in whatever way, for whatever
Because you
reason.
got to do the homework first and study the history first before dialogue, because there's
But
nobody
why
that
can it
wants.
not be that we're just moving forward? Why do we have to keep going back? And I
Because
understand.
the burden of the emotional labor is on
history.
people of color to have to, because the people of color who are doing all the emotional labor shouldn't have to be teaching. White people should be in groups of other white people, like Ruth King's Racial Affinity Group. If you go to ruthking.net, you can go sign up for a racial affinity group, and it can be all Southeast Asian Americans, it could be mixed race Americans, it could be all white Americans, it could be Black Americans, it could be Afro-Latinos, but your racial affinity group creates a safe space to talk about these issues with people like you, so that you are not making the other person do the emotional labor who has already been suffering and enduring the systemic racism for millennia.
But she's
and
already
for
done
centuries
that.
in this country.
Well, I've got to, guys, excuse me, I have to go, but let me just say this to tie into what both of you were just saying. It's not a problem to feel shame or guilt or uncomfortable. The problem is choosing to shut up, choosing to be quiet. And that's what she said. That's the thing that's the problem. And we never met before, Nina, but from your introduction, you have this huge skill set. You work in trauma, you work in all these different areas. So you definitely have the skills, the knowledge, and the capacity to go into a direction of focused learning in order to do this, because shutting up and being quiet in a certain sense can be looked at as a cop-out. I understand being uncomfortable.
I really feel the need, and I know that in part I'm responding out of defensiveness. What I didn't say about myself is that I regularly do the anti-racism training. I'm a member, and an active member of the committee at the NYU postdoc called the Committee on Ethnicity, Culture, Class, and Racism, Culture, Class, and Language.
Give me 5 minutes. I'll call you back in 5 minutes.
So it's not that I'm depending on other people to educate myself. I am in those groups. I participate with Braver Angels. I don't want to feel as though I have to give my CV as a way of validating who I am as someone who has been an active student of what the legacy of racism to which I have been a participant, if only on the basis of the privilege that I carry as a white person. So I feel very defensive. I'm not asking you to teach me, and I'm certainly not asking you to do all the talking. When I say I feel like I should shut up, it's not because I'm not out in the street demonstrating and organizing amongst the people that I know. And when I write for my professionals about the need to raise their awareness of how, as psychologists, we have a responsibility to our colleagues and communities of color to bring what we know, but also to take a back seat. That we are not the end all and be all of knowledge and experience by any manner of means. So I am feeling defensive, and perhaps it's my own responsibility for not having established my street cred.
Could I just say one thing? I think also what you're speaking to, because I know that sometimes I feel this way too, is it's really not only, I think we don't feel comfortable with, for lack of a better word, speaking about things that are uncomfortable or feeling like we're being, feeling aggression in the room, whatever you want to call it. I know, I have to say, I've done workshops with Daryl, and there are moments I could speak to, or when we have conversation, okay? When I sit there and I'm like, I feel like I just want to cower into my seat, and I feel so uncomfortable. Go ahead, Myrna.
That's how we feel all the time.
Yep.
Right? That's a Black everyday experience. If I walk into a store with my 6'4" son and he's not next to me, and I see somebody, that's that visceral reaction that you're feeling in this moment. And I think it's part of how we heal, right? And we get through this is being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And Nina, you're feeling right now, what you were saying is palpable. We all relate to that. And it goes back to the science that Francisca, you spoke to so eloquently, right? It's that fight or flight feeling that we feel, and we want to be defensive, and we want that's all of what it is. So now let's unpack that, right?
So I'm sorry, I gotta run. Nina,
Yeah.
I appreciate the fuller context of what you just gave. You might want to consider the semantics of saying take a back seat versus I feel like I should shut up and I feel shame. They're really polarizing words, because it sounds like, I just don't know what to do. I just want to shut up. So if I misread you, I apologize. I appreciate your greater context, and I appreciate the work that you do. And let me just leave this last piece. And this is not just for you. This is for any white ally doing the work. It is so easy for white people to show up, do the work, fake the funk, take a half step back, and disappear into white privilege at any time of the day. So I'm not always impressed with someone's resume regarding doing this work. It's the long haul. It's like if your hands are on the steering wheel, that's the analogy I'd say for liberation. If your hands are on the steering wheel, they're on it for the whole trip. You cannot take them off. Because you know why? Because I can die from that. And that's what I'm concerned about. And people who look like me can die for that, and do die for that. So thank you. I gotta go.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah. So we're gonna close up. Obviously, we still have all of you here, which I'm so thankful. But knowing that it's getting, that we've taken, so much of your time, and want to hear again, if there's anything. I think this conversation has been so rich and enlightening for me personally, I have to say. And I've gained so much perspective that I didn't have before. So I so appreciate this conversation. But if there's anything, that you feel would be helpful, that's left unsaid, or things that could be helpful to heal, like I said, and to really make the movement that we've all been talking about?
Could I say something?
Oh, of course.
I think the biggest problem, that just coming at it from a complete outsider, not being from this country, not having had the history that people who have grown up here have had, with, you know, the context of themselves. I just feel one of the biggest problems, us now, as I am part of America too, biggest issues is that we don't spend enough time to listen and validate what the other side feels. And even I mean, I try to get the teens to talk, you know, amongst themselves. I get kids to talk. Even before a word has left someone's mouth, the other person's already started off saying, this is just kids, oh, you know, but you don't understand. It's because you did this and you did that and whatever you did, you know, or whomever, this is our history and that is my past. And, you know, you guys have that privilege and we have this, understand where you come from. I mean, people are together because they want to make change. And so they may not know the best way how or the best way forward, but the only thing we can do is engage in dialogue of this kind and talk and you know, move the ball forward. I think the biggest thing is to say, just move forward is my point. Is we can't, yes, the context of our lives is important. Yes, having the patience to sit and listen, not the patience, the empathy and the ability to sit and listen to every mother who has gone through the strife of raising a Black child, whatever it might be that the issue might be. And also having the time to listen to someone like Nina who comes to the table. And putting it all together and moving the ball forward, I think, is so much more important for future generations. It is unpacking the past. I'm not saying it's not, but it's also understanding that we are human beings in the here and now, and we just need to move that ball forward, is how I feel.
Can I say something to
Yeah.
that effect? So, Sandy, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I do think that it's important to point out, though, I think especially when it comes to these topics, is that there's a nuance with the empathy. And as a person of color, I feel like I'm in a world where I have to be empathic to the dominant culture all the time. I have been raised to understand and be empathic and be aware of and be hyper vigilant of what it is, in addition to whatever my experience is, right? And that is not the same, you know. And so I almost feel like it's like asking a woman that has been raped or abused or traumatized to sit in a room with her abuser and understand where he's coming from before you fully acknowledge what the hell is going on. So I just want to like clarify that, because I feel like that has to be a part of these racial conversations.
I realize that there's very little time, but I do need to add one thing as a final statement. I feel that there's been some significant misunderstanding, which is not specific to this group or this moment. I think that's a fundamental piece of what goes on in an attempt to bring people of different races together to listen and to speak at the same time. I appreciate Daryl's suggestion of a new way for me to frame what I was talking about, rather than to shut up, to take a back seat. I'm not asking people of different races with whom I have worked over many years to teach me, but in my shutting up, but rather by my not insisting on my voice being heard, being able to listen and to know the pain much more directly of mothers whose children have, in fact, mothers of children of color who have to worry every time their sons or daughters walk out of the house. I think those sorts of experiences about which I need not say anything other than to be present, to take in the pain of mothers and fathers and grandmothers and aunts and uncles over how their children live and cope in a white-dominated world. That's what I mean by shutting up and listening.
Thank you. Any last, Penelope?
Well, the one thing that I was just thinking, and as referenced earlier, it's hard for me to see that there's a good reason for those who hold a racist agenda to give it up, because there's profit associated with racism. And in order to get beyond it, it's going to cost something, and it's going to cost more than dialogue and conversations and a training and an educational experience. It's going to literally cost, because it means the transfer of power or sharing of power in a way that one who holds power would not particularly be invested in sharing or giving away, especially in a capitalist society. Mm-hmm. And so I think that historically, we've seen evidence of great progress. Nothing short of the civil rights movement, let's say, and how laws, how legislation, how the commitment of the many coalesce to bring about profound change. And we've seen since that time the slow erosion and reversal of all of those gains that were made. And when I introduced myself offline as an African-American woman from the South, I grew up in the Jim Crow South. And it's very difficult for me to see a big difference between the Jim Crow South that I grew up in and what is now becoming much more explicit in our present day context. So I guess, to the point that I would just like to leave with a question is, until we all try to answer the question, what is the benefit of overcoming, moving away from adopting an anti-racist agenda, apart from the feel-good aspects of it? I don't know that, based on my tainted lens, that I see that there'll be sustained change.
So I notice, because I'm going to be doing a talk with youth and they're starting to come on, they just got in our room. So, Penelope, I am so glad that you ended with that, because that needed to be said so badly. And we really have talked about so many fundamental changes that need to happen on so many levels. So thank you for having this conversation and for making it so rich, and for giving us all something to really think about. I know it left me with thinking about so much, and really giving me actually direction on how to make change in a way that I didn't before. So I really appreciate your time, all of you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.